Hello everyone, welcome. I'm Robert, and this is another solo review. Today I'm going to talk about The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the adventure game by Modifius Entertainment. This is the retail version of the base game. I did not back the crowdfunding campaign, very successful crowdfunding campaign at that. I could have, but I was a bit skeptical. The reception seemed a bit mixed on the game, so I decided to wait and see how the game developed. And it hit retail around December last year. So I went ahead and got a copy. And now we're going to discuss what I think about this and if it's a worthwhile solo purchase or not. But first, I want to do a little component overview. There's quite a lot that is included in this box, okay? So let's get started. So I already organized everything, punched out all the tokens, and sleeved everything. Okay, so I'll discuss that. But you have your rulebook and the campaign and tutorial booklet. Okay. There's some talk boxes for saving the game state. All right, in case that you need to put the game away for in between chapters. And there's one for each player and one for the board itself. There's 4 double layered boards. And I have to say, I do like the insert that comes with this. Everything does fit back sleeved. I heard some complaints of people, not being happy with it. Now, keep in mind that this is only for the base game contents, okay? But as you can see, I'm using, by the way, Mayday sleeves, soft Mayday sleeves, and everything fit back okay. You'll need around 300 of those. I'll leave comments. I'll leave a comment with the detailed numbers in case you want to sleeve the game, which I do highly recommend, okay? But here you have the insert with the tokens and mini euro-sized cards. And then you have these boxes at the bottom for organizing the cards. And I didn't end up having to use this space over here. I assume that's for fitting this player safe boxes, all right? I did not end up utilizing this myself. But I'm sure that you could rearrange space in case you want to fit all the expansion content. I'm pretty sure you could. But I, as far as the sleeving aspect of it, not sure myself. I don't have any expansion content, but it does seem that there's plenty of room here. So I do hope, I would hope that expansion content will fit in there. So for the base game, you have these 6 miniatures. Retail version includes this Red Guard miniature, all right? It's not a player miniature, but it's a very nice miniature nevertheless, all right? And one positive already I'll mention, component-wise, I think these miniatures are gorgeous and they are just begging to be painted, all right? Very, very good miniatures. Okay. Yeah, so these are the tokens that as a solo player I did not end up needing. And it fits neatly back in there. I mostly just use tokens here for solo play. This fit the bill, so I just put them in this little pill organizer. Okay, so for cards, one interesting thing, all right, is that you have to organize them by number. So it comes with these card dividers. I think you can see the 400 number there. So cards, the majority of the cards in this game are numbered, and you're gonna have to browse them, all right? I used penny sleeves to sleeve everything. I do highly advise that you sleeve, especially these standard size cards. I strongly advise you do because you're gonna be browsing them a lot, and by sleeving them, it makes that a bit easier, and you're not gonna have to risk scratching or tearing the side of the card when sleeving. Okay, sorry, when browsing. So there's dividers for the different numbered cards, and you'll need about 500 sleeves total, okay? But penny sleeves get the job done. Not a lot of things here need to be shuffled, to be honest with you. So penny sleeves, just soft sleeves, do the job here. Okay, so about 400 in total, and that. So you have the board, which that's where the review will take place when I talk about the gameplay later and my thoughts. I'll remove all of this and we'll talk on the over the board, which is very big, by the way. So you have some tarot size cards for player aids, and that's pretty much it as far as the components. So now the board, it is quite big, okay? Before I talk about the gameplay, I do want to go ahead and mention that now. The board is gigantic and one of the biggest in my entire collection, okay? My personal table that I use for most of my board games barely fitted. I'll leave some measurements for you there to read so that you plan ahead in case you do want to get the game. Because it might be a real issue if you are planning to get this game. This might not fit on your table, all right? So I'll leave some measurements and figure that out in advance before deciding to purchase this, because it might be a real issue for some folks. You might not have a table that'll fit this, and there's a plethora of objects, components that you have to fit around it. So make sure to do your research on that. I'll leave the measurements there for you in the description, all right, if you want to just make it easier for you, all right, so you don't have to go looking for it. But yeah, so that's as far as the components, that gives you an overview, all right. It's quite a heavy box. It's pretty big. There's lots included. And now let's pause for a second, and now let me do a little arrangement on the table and we'll talk about the gameplay. Alright, so let's do a brief gameplay overview. This is not going to be a detailed tutorial. Just want to give you an idea of what happens in this game. So there's a couple ways that you can play. You can choose to play a campaign, which will involve a few chapters. And you're going to be able, with the base game, to play 2 campaigns, each containing 3 chapters. So you can play the campaigns in chapters one after another, and the board will roughly remain the same in between chapters. There's some setup involved when you finish a chapter, move on to the next one. Or you can also play the chapters as standalone scenarios, all right? There's different setup instructions for that. So you're going to choose how you want to play. Oh, and there's also a free roam mode, but I'm not going to go into detail about that here. So you are going to choose your chapter, and you're going to set up according to the chapter setup instructions. You're going to pick a character. There's going to be some starting gear, and you're going to set up your board, your character board, double layer board with your starting stats, starting gear. And then you're also going to set up, when you set up a chapter, there's cards like the event from the event deck, for example, that are specific to the chapter in question. So here it says these event cards belong to chapter 1 from the first campaign, all right? So you're going to prepare the board, your character, and follow the setup instructions for that, and then you're ready to get started. So typically each chapter will have a quest, a world quest, all right, that you need to progress through. So when you succeed or fail the quest, you're going to keep progressing regardless, all right? You're going to be prompted to draw cards from the deck of cards that is arranged numerically, okay? So when you finish a quest, most of the time, whether you fail or succeed, you are going to progress through the story, and eventually you're going to finish, you're going to arrive, as you progress through the story, you're going to arrive at a card that completes the chapter, right? Now, during the game, the player turn goes as follows. So you're going to have the option to move up to 4 spaces on the board, and you may move up to 5 if you have a horse. You also have the option to move through carriage between fortresses, okay, by paying gold, right? So that way you can go longer distances. And each quest is going to have a location associated with it. So it'll instruct you to put a quest marker somewhere on the board. You're going to have to go there to complete the quest. Now, how do you complete quests? Well, everything is resolved with dice, and everything is a test, right? So you're going to do stat tests, all right? And you will have the option to push your luck by rolling more dice, and tests will require you to roll specific phases in order to succeed or fail. All right. And you're also going to battle monsters, right, throughout the land. And when you finish certain quests, they'll involve combat, and monsters have their own dice that you roll, okay, to determine what they do in combat. And in addition to moving around the map for the purposes of completing quests, so you're gonna, as you progress, you're gonna get markers throughout the land with quest markers, okay? So you're gonna have many options of what to choose to do every turn. So in addition to that, you also can go on your own and simply explore the land. You can check dungeons or towns or wilderness areas, and in that case, this is known as narrative exploration. Okay, so if you don't want to go and pursue a quest, you can simply draw from the town deck or the wilderness deck to acquire personal quests, okay, and materials. So personal quests are important because in addition to the world quests, you want to have other quests that provide this number right here. This means that you can put threat tokens on that card up to 4. So threat tokens are the timing mechanism of the game. It puts a clock on you, so it puts some pressure. So by exploring the land, you're gonna acquire extra quests, okay? However, there is a limit of 2 per player, and this prevents you from having to put threat tokens on the forts and on the main quest card, because if the main quest card is becomes full of reaches its limit of threat tokens, you lose. All right. So you want to prevent that. So you are encouraged to go out roaming the land and acquiring personal quests, so that when you complete them, it helps you mitigate some of those threat tokens. Now, how do you acquire threat tokens? Well, almost every turn, you're going to draw event cards, and event cards will prompt you to add threat tokens among your available quests, okay? So you're going to be leveling up, acquiring gold, all right, acquiring experience, and as you acquire that, and also materials, okay, which you can use to craft items, enhance, upgrade your items, or enchant your items, okay? So you're going to be acquiring those materials and also leveling up, and as you level up, you're going to be acquiring skills, which you put on your character board as such. You're also going to be increasing your stats as you explore the land, slay monsters, and acquire loot and level up. And as I said, in between chapters, if you decide to play a campaign, the board state roughly remains the same. You're going to be adding cards that are corresponding to the respective chapter, and then you're going to keep playing, basically. So that is the gist of the gameplay in Skyrim, the adventuring game. Now, let's move on to what I think about the game. Okay, so let's start with the positives. So first, I have to mention the timer in this game is very interesting, because lots of adventuring games, the one that I've tried anyway, have it pretty. They have an urgency to them, where you really can't let the main goal or quest or world timer element get out of control. So they don't really encourage you too much to explore freely, but this game leans a lot more towards that, okay? You are encouraged to explore the land. It doesn't punish you much at all for deviating from the main quest, and that feels great. It really is a change of pace from this type of adventuring games. There's lots of adventuring games I still need to try, but I've read a lot. I've read a lot about other adventuring games that I haven't necessarily played, but it does appear that this game is a change of pace from the norm in these games. It encourages you to roam the land freely, and that feels great. And that's kind of what the game is like, so it captures that aspect from the video game. I also enjoyed a lot the leveling up and developing my character and choosing skills. It felt great every time that I picked a skill from my character, okay? The crafting system is interesting. The looting is interesting. I enjoy the looting, the developing my character, the possibilities of different builds for characters, just like in the video game. That's present here. That there's I'm sure there's gonna be an optimal build for each character based on their pre-existing abilities. But that's fine. I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't experiment with your character builds here. Okay, there's lots of variety between the loot and the quests. There plenty of variety there, and plenty of content just in the core box. Okay, a pretty good package. Lots of for what you get. There's plenty of content here. And finally, the component quality, pretty good. I think it's a good production, a really good component quality. Love the miniatures, double layer boards, the components. I don't have an issue with that. I think I'll list that as a positive. So that's it for the positives. Now let's move on to the negatives. I must begin by talking about this monstrosity right here. This is one of the worst rulebooks that I've had the displeasure of reading. F-, absolute fail, unacceptable rulebook. Here's the thing. I am very flexible with rulebooks being imperfect. However, this game, it's got a very high price tag, and it had a very successful campaign behind it. It raised over £1 million, and it is representing Skyrim, one of the most beloved video games of all time. So how come the publisher thinks that this is acceptable? If I was tasked with creating a rulebook for a video game based on Skyrim, and this is what ended up in people's doors, I would be absolutely ashamed. I will always say this when I talk about negatively about rulebooks in any of my reviews. I do not envy the task of writing a rulebook. I know it is not easy. It's a very, very daunting task. But how come, with the success that the campaign had with the established publisher, how come it turned out like this? And why did they think it was acceptable to put it out like this? There's so many things missing from this rulebook. It's so nebulous. There's examples missing. It's deceptive because like most board games, I'm rewarded typically at the end of reading a rulebook and setting on the game and playing it. This is deceptive because I spend that effort, right, that I typically spend with board games, but I was not rewarded. I felt like a beta tester for the developer. If that's what they were aiming for, because Bethesda does have that reputation of releasing broken games at launch, congratulations, because they definitely managed to translate that to the board game of Skyrim as well. But why would you want to do that? I ended up playing the first 3 chapters of the campaign number 1, but I gave up towards chapter 3. It got to a point where the questions just kept piling up, and I ended up spending more time looking up rules questions between the Board Game Geek forums and the publishers forums than I did playing the game. And 90% of the time, there wasn't an answer to the things that were raised during my play sessions. And if you look at the publishers forums, just the FAQ, it's ridiculous how many questions have piled up just with the game just coming out. You go on Board Game Geek, there's so many questions, so many. And I think it's an abnormal volume, honestly, I think the rulebook is just incomplete. They decided to release an incomplete and unfinished rulebook. I'm going to make a comparison here. I've played Dungeon Degenerates, and that's another adventuring game that is soloable, and it has a board with, it has pandemic style, pressure timers. It is another adventuring game. So there's definitely a lot of similarities between that game and this. And in my opinion, this has roughly the same rules weight as Dungeon Degenerates. However, Dungeon Degenerates raised a fraction of the money that this game raised during its campaign. And those folks, it's like a mom and pop operation. They didn't publish a board game that I know of before that. and yet it has one of the most amazing rule books and player rates that I've ever read. At no point in my entire experience with that game I had to look up something on Board Game Geek. Everything was in the rulebook, and it has, it is an RPG in a box. So these type of games they tend to be complex, but they managed, a small mom and pop team managed to do that. Well, I don't know exactly the amount of people, but I know this definitely smaller than the amount of people that played this for a fraction of the price. So how come it is this awful, the rulebook? So this just kept happening throughout the experience. I just kept having to do homework basically, and I just got sick of it. I didn't finish chapter 3, and that's it. I didn't want to play it again because it's just incomplete basically. And I'm not gonna play this again. I'm not willing to sell it or get rid of it. At some point it'll be in an acceptable state. I think it'll take a couple of years before it gets there, and I do want to play it again once it's fixed, but right now, no way. This is just horrible, miserable experience. And again, it's deceptive because you read the rulebook and I thought, okay, I'm good to go. No way. You'll encounter things that, okay, wait, hold on, is this mentioned in the rulebook? Oh wait, no, it's not. And again, you go and check. 90% of your questions are not gonna. The majority of your questions are not gonna be answered yet. Anyway, so rulebook, absolute failure, huge barrier. Unless you enjoy reading incomplete rulebooks, I would avoid. This is just a deal breaker for me. All right, I wish I had known this because the ratings didn't really make much mention of this. The majority of the ratings on Board Game Geek are positive. I don't understand. I'll comment more on that later. But majority of ratings on this are very, very positive, which I got fooled into thinking that this was, a high, super polished experience. No, it's not. Absolutely not. Now, let's move on to other negatives that I have, because the rulebook is not the only problem with this game, unfortunately. The price, again, it's just when you compound everything. All right, the fact that it raised this much money, the IP that it's tied to, the price, it's $140 game. How is it possible that you pay that much? Imagine paying that much money and this is what you get. It's ridiculous. Next, another issue is the dice test in this game. All right, now I've played many dice games and I have never really had an issue with locking games. All right, I've played many dice games and I know that there's people that dislike dice because they think that dislike dice games because they think that they have bad luck, and they just dislike the idea of rolling dice and they think that they have horrible luck. But that thought has never really crossed my mind. I enjoy dice games. I've played dozens of them. But this game, the way that tests work in this game is just weird. I felt that the way that these symbols are distributed in the dice for resolving tests, sometimes I just felt punished and it left a bad taste in my mouth in a way that no other game has when it comes to dice. Especially when attacking with weapons. Weapons will, you need to choose an attack with weapons, and each attack requires different symbols in order to succeed. So you'll roll dice and you'll miss, you'll fail the test. And then it's like, well, if I had chosen the other attack, it would have been successful. So, I'm being punished for choosing the wrong attack. What? I don't know. Like, at this point, this negative point is a bit harder for me to articulate, but I'm not the only one who had this complaint, because I did read other people who had a similar complaint to mine. I'm just having a bit of a hard time articulating it, but I'm telling you that I've never really had an issue with dice in games or being unlucky. Never, ever. But this is the first game that has just the dice have left a bad taste in my mouth, right? Many times throughout my play. Another issue I have is these tokens. Now, for the materials, because this box right here, there's plenty of space, that's fine. This slot for the materials is okay. Now, for experience and for gold, this was extremely fiddly to manage because when you manipulate these tokens, they're very prone to flipping, right? See how it just flipped there, me trying to pick it up? Just very fiddly, and if you're not paying extra attention, you might lose track of how much experience you had. So I switched to dice for this purpose, for experience and for gold. So I really disliked how fiddly that was. I want to talk about the fact that they did not include the Argonian race in the base game. Guess what? That is the class that I picked for Skyrim when I played the video game. And if you want to play as an Argonian, you have to buy an expansion, which, by the way, the expansions for this game cost almost the same as a full board game, all right? And really all I want... Look, there's tons of content in the base game, I already mentioned that, but it's sorely missed. If you want to alienate players whose favorite race is Argonian, great job, because I just really hate that you decided to make that an expansion exclusive character. And kudos to the marketing folks for coming up with that. If you want to fleece people for more money, I don't blame you, but I'm not gonna fall for that. I'm not gonna buy an expansion just because I don't have access to the one race that I cared about for playing the game as. But I'll let Riley Freeman express how I feel about that.
That's a bitch move, Santa.
Thank you, Riley. Okay, so moving on to the next negative. The exploration tokens. I know that they were trying to be faithful to the video game with how they designed these tokens, but they just don't stand out very much on the board. So browsing the board and looking for where these are located, they're not very visible. They're gray, they barely stand out. I think they should have been made of a different material, like a glossy material, so that they stand a bit more, maybe made of acrylic, or maybe just paint them all white so that they stand up a bit more. Like, I know that it's faithful, the board is faithful to how it looks on the video game, like I get it, but in practice, these tokens, which you're going to be putting a lot of in the board, they don't stand out almost at all. So that was a bit of an annoyance that I had throughout my time playing the game. And as far as my negatives, I think that is it for now. But as you can see, this is a huge issue for me. I know that there are some board gamers that are a bit more open to rules being flexible, and that house rule have the board game. If you're having fun with that, great. I'm not like that. I want a rigid structure, okay, that I can then, if I want to, I can mess around with the foundations of it, but that rigid structure needs to be there, in my opinion. But it's just not here. So let's just move on to some final thoughts, and let's just conclude this. All right, so now let's arrive at my final thoughts on this. To summarize my positives, I do think that there is fun to be had with this game, for sure. The components are great, it captures the video game very well, there's tons of content just from the base set, and the leveling up of your character is very enjoyable, okay? Now, what does all of that matter if the rulebook is such a miserable experience to go through, all right? The rulebook, the way that they decided to release it, is absolutely unacceptable, as I've mentioned many times by now. And I am not going to sell the game. I'm going to wait for the rulebook to be updated to a satisfactory state. Well, first, because I enjoy collecting soloable board games based on video games. And I do have faith that eventually this will be a solid rulebook. And I honestly don't think, though, that the next one or two iterations will still, be it, because if this is what the company thinks is acceptable, I really don't think that the next one or two versions are going to be acceptable either. So I estimate maybe 1 or 2 years before this is in a decent state. So basically they decided to just release a broken and incomplete product. And if they were trying to adapt that aspect of Bethesda games to board game form, congratulations, like I said. But I don't know why they decided to do that. One thing I'll mention too is maybe this isn't the fault of the folks behind the rulebook. Maybe someone at the publisher thought that they needed more time to work on it, but maybe a higher up just wanted to push it out for the holidays. All right, that can happen. I know that there's I know that there can be company politics. Okay, now consumers shouldn't have to concern themselves with that. Doesn't change the fact that this is awful and a deal breaker for me, the way that this is. And please take with a huge grain of salt all the positive ratings that this game has. I am just mystified, folks, at the amount of positive ratings that you'll find for this game on Board Game Geek. Look, if you're enjoying the game and you had a great time, good for you. I am happy for you. However, I just don't know how anybody could go through this rulebook and leave a positive rating. I just don't know. So do your research. Make sure that you're going to be okay having to do homework, basically, and fill in the gaps for the developers who provided you an incomplete rulebook. I would advise you instead, though, in my personal opinion, stay away from this game. Do not spend your hard-earned cash on this. There's much better adventuring games with competent rulebooks that you can buy right now while you wait for this to be fixed, okay? For example, I recommend Explored, Valley of the Dead King, or the Forest of Adramon version. Many people have compared that to a Skyrim-like experience. To me, that's my holy grail adventuring game. Maybe I'll do a review on it one day. I recommend that 100%. So go buy that, one of those two versions of Explored, while you wait for the developers to fix this. You could also buy Gloom of Kilforth. I recommend that too. It recently, as of the recording of this, it got a retail release. Buy Gloom of Kilforth, or Dungeon Degenerates, or Runebound 2nd or 3rd edition. There's other adventuring games you can buy while they fix this. The cost, speaking of negatives, the cost is just so insulting. Way better ways to spend your money in the meantime, okay, while this is fixed. So do not spend your money on this. I would not, if I had known this, again, the ratings on Board Game Geek really were, didn't paint that picture to me of how bad the rulebook was. Way too many positive ratings, praising, doing high praising of the game. And even if the rulebook was perfect, the game's okay. I mean, it's not like a 10 or 9 in my opinion. It's a good adventuring game, but I think the rulebook is an absolute deal breaker for me. So again, do your research, but I would advise you to stay away from this. I would not touch this game with a 10-foot pole if I knew how bad the rulebook was, because I just wasted my time studying it, and I didn't get the reward I typically get from board games after spending all the time studying and learning them. But that's it, folks. I hope you found this video informative. If you have any questions or feedback, please put them in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.